Thank you for having me here today, and I'm going to be speaking on behalf of SWET. Even though I've currently since worked for the African Sex Work Alliance and the Global Network of Sex Work Projects, I do try to continue to support the work that's done by SWET in South Africa. I'm currently now based in Brighton at the University of Sussex. A bit about SWET. SWET was established in 1996. Basically, it's a non-governmental organization advocating for the rights of adult, consenting sex workers. I always find that it's very important for me to stress those points. And as part of SWET, we have Sisonke, which is the movement of sex workers. So SWET has its base in Cape Town, but we have host organizations, our partner organizations, in the other 9 provinces of South Africa. In terms of the sex work landscape in South Africa, we did a size estimate study in 2013, which found that there are approximately 153,000 sex workers in South Africa. We still believe that's a gross underestimate, but that's the figure we're currently working with. Majority of these are female, black, and street-based. And even though they're street-based, meaning they're working in urban areas, we find that most of them have actually migrated from rural areas to work in the cities. Sex work is currently fully criminalized in South Africa under the Section 20 of the Sexual Offences Act, which means the buyer, the client, the seller, the sex worker, and anyone living off the earnings of a sex worker is considered a criminal. And if you strictly interpret this law, you might as well be criminalizing the children of sex workers. Now, in 2002, the South African Law Reform Commission started the law reform process in terms of trying to get the country to talk about what legal form would better suit South Africa instead of criminalization. So an issue paper was released, which in 2009 was followed by a discussion paper. Sex workers and organizations working with sex workers were encouraged to submit their recommendations, which SWET and Sisonke did. But until now, the South African Law Reform Commission has not released its findings. And this means that the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development cannot deliberate over these findings and formulate a recommendation that they can present to the rest of Parliament. So essentially, the whole process has been stalled. In that, what we've tried to do is to develop a draft sex work bill, which we then take to members of Parliament when we lobby them. So we have Sisonke members who are lobbyists who directly engage with MPs on this. And basically what the draft bill calls for is a model which is decriminalization, which allows only consenting adults to work in the sex industry. So children, persons under the age of 18 would not be, and also excluding persons who have been forced or coerced into selling sex. Brothels would be registered under the Business Act of 1991 and comply with the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 85 of 1993. Sex workers would be required to register with the Labour Department and submit tax returns in compliance with the South African Revenue Service Act of 34 of 1997. And sex worker movements would be able to form unions. So that means Sisonke would be able to turn itself into a movement. And on that point, I would like to add that COSATU, which is the Congress of South African Trade Unions, it's our largest alliance of unions in South Africa, is in support of decriminalization and is in support of Sisonke turning into a trade union once sex work has been decriminalized. And finally, the draft also proposes that a sex work law review committee be established to monitor the implementation of the law reform process and compile recommendations for its strengthening. And it's important for us to add that this committee would be made up of sex workers themselves and other role players in the sex work industry. And just to end off with an interesting anecdote, in our lobbying of MPs, we came across one MP who's actually part of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. He's been a former judge, so he's quite high up there. And he said to us, okay, off the record, I get it, I understand it, I get your evidence, I hear your stories. Sex work should be decriminalized in South Africa. But you have to find an MP to champion this bill of yours, an MP who is either ready to retire or an MP who is no longer interested in politics. And that MP is not me. So this is the kind of reality and resistance that we're facing. We have the evidence. We've presented the evidence. People, the MPs are getting it. So in that anecdote, I'm really hoping that the MPs that are here do not prioritize their own political endeavors and ambitions over the evidence that is being presented in front of them by their constituencies that voted for them. Thank you.